And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen, standing at the ready to fight anew for the issues that matter right now with a sense of urgency. If that's what you want to do, well, Sierra Podcast is the place to go. Now, not only available on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you hear audio, but video as well at Horowitz Show on YouTube, Sierra Podcast on Rumble. I couldn't get the name uh, everywhere. So, got to get what you got to get here. And of course, on Substack now, Daniel Horowitz, Liberating Truths on Substack, where I actually did get my name. So, thankfully, we are getting the message out, and we really need to. We need a sense of urgency. I laid out the case at the beginning of this week, the new year. I laid out about a dozen urgent issues that need to be dealt with, and we're going to be going through one after another. Today, we're going to talk about the urgent problem of foreign truck drivers that are not properly trained and seem to account for a massive percentage of these tragic deaths and accidents on the road. So we're gonna be hooking up with Shannon Everett for the new year. We've had him on a couple times last year. I've never seen a guy that predicted such a niche problem, identified it, and everything he said turned out to be true. So we're gonna be uh, gauging some of the success and failure on that, what needs to be done. But just in general, we'll talk about the sense of urgency that we need on a bunch of other issues. What we don't need to talk about is what would happen on the other side of next election. I want to hear about what you're going to do now. So the president spoke to the Republican House conference and he said that if we don't win the midterms, I will get impeached. And this is just a straw man rallying cry because impeachment is dead. I mean, even if Democrats do win, they're not going to have 67 votes in the Senate. Honestly, I don't even think they're going to waste time with it anymore. It doesn't work well for both parties. Uh, the Democrats are able to stymie the agenda to the extent Trump has one without impeachment. And frankly, they're doing that now because Republicans are Democrats. So that's what we need to change right now on these issues that matter. And, just to start off with Venezuela, I want to make a point here because I have somewhat of a nuanced take on it. I don't reflexively support everything he does or reflexively oppose everything he does for good reason, because you got to judge it by its own merits. I believe we need to be strong, particularly in our hemisphere. I've been calling for a Monroe Doctrine for quite some time. Kick out the Chinese, Russians, Iranians, Turks from Latin America. But at the same time, there is an issue of trust, but there's also an issue where Trump has been in with the tech bros and has denied the affordability problems. Doesn't look like he cares to deal with them because he doesn't think it is a problem. And then foreign policy, which I believe is important and always have and have talked about it, but it looms too large in this administration. And the danger of that is that it plays into the hands of the groypers who, don't want to be strong on a national stage in any way. And they'll be like, look, all you want to do is talk about Venezuela. I mean, now Rick Scott, the rhino from Florida, by the way, was the governor before DeSantis. A lot of people think, oh my gosh, DeSantis turned it from a Democrat state. Well, he did, but it actually had a Republican governor who was like a Democrat. So he was out there saying, oh, we need to do this in Colombia and Nicaragua and Cuba. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. We need to fundamentally focus on what's here at home. Now, again, I don't mind strike and maneuver. I don't mind taking their oil, but is that really what we're doing here? Trump, this from Semaphore, Trump said, where is this? The Trump administration is grappling with how to help Venezuela tackle billions of dollars of debt. Caracas's creditors are increasingly hopeful U.S. involvement will help them recoup the losses. And basically, Senator Bill Hagerty from Tennessee said everything's on the table in terms of bringing the economy back into the first world, calling for lifting restrictions on incentives and sanctions. And my question is, we're talking about Venezuela's debt. We're babysitting Venezuela's economy. See, this is the thing. I don't mind taking out a bad leader. But again, there's signs that we're somehow going to babysit this. Well, we're going to get their oil. Okay, but if that requires us to babysit their economy and take on national security problems and security problems for our troops and subsidize oil companies for that, no, thank you. Let's worry about our economy here. See, my broader concern is that Trump is trying to build this broader uh, empire, which some of it in a vacuum, I'm not opposed to. I'm not opposed to taking their oil. I'm not opposed to purchasing Greenland to the extent that's really serious. But what this can't be is a distraction to supplant what needs to be done on our debt, healthcare, gold accounts, like we talked about yesterday, our economy, housing, things like that. And the problem is Trump and his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent have articulated this view that somehow we could get away without remaking our economy, reprivatizing, rebalancing our economy by just simply acquiring foreign assets and foreign revenue. And that could be a piece of the puzzle, but that's not going to be a lot. So this notion that you're going to rebuild the economy off of tariffs, rebuild it off of purchasing the Panama Canal or Greenland or Venezuela, all this is going to do is make younger voters even more suspicious about any strong foreign policy and have them sour on Trump in general. So I just feel like voters are looking at him and they don't perceive a sense of urgency on the issues that matter here. And one of them is obviously healthcare. Okay, one of the big ones is healthcare. Now, when it comes to healthcare, we've already said Republicans are on the hook. Trump is on the hook for the high costs no matter what. You may as well put forth your best plan to re-privatize it and be done with Obamacare and all this stuff. But instead, you have this bipartisan group of senators. Bernie Moreno, this new supposedly based guy from Ohio, who's really a socialist, is working with Susan Collins and Democrat Gene Shaheen, a couple other Dems, to basically do nothing. No systemic reforms. Take Obamacare, preserve it all, and even preserve the Biden expansion, but put in some caps that you can't earn $1 trillion and still get the subsidies, and you have to pay at least $1. You can't have $0 premiums. I mean, that's not going to change anything. You're going to own it. You're going to get blamed for it. And then you're just going to cement the current nonsense. Those of you who are watching, see, this is why you got to watch at Horowitz show on YouTube. I'm putting up here a graphic from Semaphore put this out. Health expenditures per capita in 2024 by country. The OECD average was $6,100 spent per capita. Do you know what America is? Almost 15,000, more than twice the average. Even higher, much higher, 5,000 to 6,000 higher than Switzerland and Norway with their much vaunted socialist healthcare. And this is what I've been driving home for years. For too many years, Republicans defended our way of our approach to healthcare versus Europe as if our system is capitalistic. Yeah, that's socialist. But no, our system is venture socialist. There's more grift, more waste. In many respects, it's worse than Europe because you have the greed of the private sector absent the check and balance of the free market. Basically, because the government prints money to funnel endless funds into a fake private monopoly that government propped up, but then there's more waste. So on the one hand, you do have a little bit more R&D, better surgery than Europe has, where it's like the post office literally running healthcare. But on the other hand, the cost is insane and the grift is insane. And now the quality is becoming as bad or worse than Europe. We shouldn't be defending that at all. We should be railing against that entire system and replacing it wholesale. But instead, of course, the entire debate is now devolving into abortion. I love it how when it's time to address abortion, like with the abortion pill, we don't do it. But then when it's time to address healthcare, it becomes all about abortion. So the only debate about this stupid plan is not the fundamentals of healthcare, but what will we do with the Hyde Amendment of Medicaid funding abortion? So this is what the president had to say about this debate about the Hyde Amendment. Take a listen here.
The money go in the healthcare account or however you do it. Let the money go directly to the people. Now, you have to be a little flexible on Hyde. You know that. You got to be a little flexible. You got to work something. You got to use ingenuity. You got to work. We're all big fans of everything, but you got to be flexible. You have to have flexibility.
Okay, folks, do you understand what the hell he was saying? Well, I mean, I know he wants to give on the Hyde Amendment and fund abortions. I mean, we get that. But I don't mean to be mean here, but the guy talks weird. What is that? I don't even know what that is. I don't understand why you have these sycophants on the right that think he's God. I mean, he sounds retarded. But that's a side point. I don't even get it. But this notion, okay, that you're just going to do subsidies and hand it out to people. I mean, to a certain extent, I would support that if you would have a minimal amount. But to take the current thing and just hand it to people, that's slightly indirect, but that's the same thing as juicing up the insurance companies. Because absent structural reform with the way we approach insurance, all that's going to do is, so you give the people $1 trillion a year to purchase a monopolistic insurance, where you only have 5 or 6 companies. So then next year, they'll charge even more. And then rinse and repeat. But this is where we're at now with funding abortions. So we're going backwards on that. By the way, on that point, just a separate thing here. The Wyoming Supreme Court, 4-1, ruled against the state's abortion ban, which included the abortion pill. So I have a question for you. If we're now going to accede to judicial supremacism, and by the way, all those judges were appointed by Republicans, we have the most conservative state in the country that Trump won by 40 points. Democrats have like 2 seats in the state Senate, no Democrat elected statewide, and yet we can't get an abortion ban through because we have the state Supreme Court with leftists appointed by Republicans. This is what I mean when I say I don't want to hear about the general election nationally at the 50-yard line in the purple states for the midterms in Congress, which is irrelevant anyway. I want to hear about what you're going to do with the power that you have now nationally, but permanently in red states like Wyoming, but not really because the Republicans are Democrats. And here we are 10 years into MAGA on our 11th year, and nothing is changing because Trump keeps endorsing rhinos. And the guy I hoped would run for governor, Chuck Gray, is stupidly running for Congress. Imagine that. You could run for anything in Wyoming. Congress is at large, the entire state. So for the same money you need to run for governor, you're using for Congress to get one House seat, where you're basically stuck between Trump forcing you to vote for liberal things and rhino leadership and a narrow majority anyway. What are you going to do? But that's his decision. So now we'll be stuck with some buffoon taking over from another buffoon, Mark Gordon, in Wyoming. This is what I mean. I said this yesterday, that we're not electing more DeSantis's in any red state. It's terrible. It's ridiculous. A couple other points here just wanted to get across before we get to immigration and our special guest. A global minimum tax, okay? Did you ever think we would agree to essentially a scheme, OCD treaty, not really treaty, it's called Pillar 2, where we would subjugate ourselves to global taxation to the point where Congress is precluded from ever cutting taxes? This is a long discussion. I don't have time to get into it, but here's the punchline of it. For several years now, Biden really forged this idea with all the European countries, other countries, to get together and say, hey, we don't want a race. They call it a race to the bottom, which is not a race to the bottom, but it's really a race to the top, that everyone's trying to outdo each other and cut taxes. And we don't want that. We want more tax revenue. So they basically wanted to create a mandatory minimum tax of 15% on, multinational corporations. And while that sounds low, you have to understand, like, our tax rate is 21%, but it means the effective tax rate, which often with our R&D credit, which is an important credit, you want research and development, that gets us, typically maybe 12, 13% or so. So they're claiming we're in violation of that. And the Trump administration always rejected that. We're not gonna do that. So they cut a deal this week and basically said, okay, America could be grandfathered into its current scheme, but any future tax cut wouldn't be covered and it would be in violation. And that would allow foreign countries to basically seize that revenue from these companies. Now, I will tell you, I'm the first one to say that this is applying mainly to companies that have over 750 million in revenue, not small companies. I am not in favor of focusing on tax cuts for large corporations right now. I don't think that's what we need to be doing. But with that said, what I don't want to do is subjugate ourselves and our sovereignty to a foreign tax entity and a global minimum tax that would preclude us from ever cutting taxes. So why the Trump administration agreed to that, I don't know, but I'm sure there's some sort of pay for play going on there, as there always is. So we surrendered our tax sovereignty to the globalist. Whoop-de-doo. Maybe the Venezuelan debt will help pay that off. Kind of ridiculous. So that's with that. One other story I want to get to, and then I promise we'll get to immigration. There's an important Atlantic article that came out during the break about how the Republican Congress hates Mike Johnson and they want him gone. And they make it clear. So now a lot of people say, yeah, Johnson sucks. But why was Johnson there to begin with, and why does he remain? Well, the article makes clear that he only remains in that position because Trump supports him, and everything he does is at his behest. One Republican told the Atlantic, quote, the reason he's hanging on is because Trump wants a weak speaker. He wants a speaker that essentially functions like a staff member, which is what Mike Johnson does. So, folks, if you don't like Speaker Johnson, you might want to take it up with the boss. Like, I'm sick of hearing this, that it's about Johnson. Johnson is only there because of Trump. Everything he does is a conduit for Trump. So if you don't like the agenda, then you don't like Trump's agenda. And that's the problem. It's not that he doesn't do some good things here or there. I don't agree with it. But like we're saying with Venezuela, on balance, the priorities are just bizarre. Some of them are bad, some of them are neutral, some of them are a little bit good, but it's just not hitting the top 12 issues. And again, on the big things like AI, he's actually on the wrong side. By the way, I mean, this is why people are just, their brains are being rotted. I have a ton of news on AI I'm going to put out, and I don't have time. See, we're going to probably focus on AI tomorrow or Friday, but I've always told you I don't have time to get to everything that I want to show you. So what I'm going to do is sort of the leftovers. We're going to have this Daniel's Digest, Daniel Horowitz at Substack. So just subscribe there, and you'll get it. I'm aiming for twice a week. I can't promise, but that way you'll be able to see some of these forgotten links. Some of them are obvious stories. Some of them are things you probably haven't seen, and you're going to want to subscribe. And that way you don't have to rely on the algorithms, which I have no way of getting, you know, indulged by them. Because if you follow me on Twitter, you're not necessarily going to see it. That's what I've come to realize. No one sees what I put out there. So that's why if you subscribe on Substack, you get it directly in your mailbox, and there's no way that it could be blocked by the algorithms. But I do want to get to our special guest a sense of urgency on immigration. So, folks, there is nothing more devastating than losing a loved one suddenly in a car accident. Just, someone who wasn't sick at all, snuffed out. And this has long been a problem on our roads, the drunk driving, reckless driving. But I have never seen anything like this phenomenon in America, where one after another, some of these horrific truck accidents that you hear on the road on a daily basis, you look into it a little bit, and it turns out it's a foreign driver. Now, last year, we started this partnership with the American Truckers United, this organization that was warning that, yes, we all know in a macro sense, illegal immigration and aspects of legal immigration have become a very big problem, many different analogs of this problem. But there was a particular forgotten avenue of this in that the trucking industry is being taken over by illegal drivers, foreign worker visa drivers, people that can't speak English, people that don't know how to drive, that aren't properly trained, and just in general taking away very good jobs that should all be American. And I was like, okay, maybe it's a little bit here and there. And me of all people, I've said this many, many times, that I don't believe in demagoguing an issue. So while illegal immigration is a very big problem, I don't believe it's the fundamental problem of, let's say, healthcare or housing. It's a problem, but mainly those are stupid economic policies. This just makes it even worse. But when it comes to truck accidents, I mean, it's got to be a massive percentage. And we're seeing it from the illegals south of the border, but we're also seeing it from a lot of Indian drivers. This really came to life last year with that horrific car accident or a truck accident from these Indian worker drivers in Florida. And what happens now is they get their CDLs in places like New York, places like California, but then they'll drive anywhere. So what is it that red states can and must do about this? First, to police their own system, their own CDL system, and then prevent other blue state CDL recipients from coming in that are not citizens. And what could the Trump administration do? We've heard a lot of good talk from the Treasury Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, but honestly, I'm not seeing robust action across the border, at least not this sense of urgency. The amount of people killed every week is just shocking. The disruption as well. We're just seeing, you'll have these trucks pulled over. We're also seeing, stolen trailers. I know that the Florida governor at his press conference on immigration enforcement mentioned that Florida recovered over 400 semi-trailers stolen. So this is a very compound, complex issue, and it's so easy to redress. Obviously, you're always going to have car accidents, you're going to have truck accidents, but we sure as heck don't need it from people that should not be getting licenses and seem to, for whatever reason, and we'll delve into this, have a much higher risk of reckless driving, drunk driving, and just overall insanity. So with us today is really the man who broke this issue wide open for the country. Shannon Everett, he's co-founder of American Truckers United, a lifelong truck driver, truck industry expert. Was part of the Arkansas Truckers Association, not to be mixed up with ATA, the American Truckers Association, which is unfortunately bought into the foreign co-opt of this industry. Follow them at ATU Truckers on Twitter. Hey, Shannon, Happy New Year's and welcome back.
Happy New Year's, Daniel. Glad to be back with you. Really appreciate you staying on this issue.
No, I wanted to follow up because over the Christmas break, over December, I was following your Twitter feed. And without that, I wouldn't know, because you hear horrific truck crash, kills 3. And so you guys have made it your business to look into this. And it's like every darn time. Could you give us some sort of metric of what is the scope of this problem of dangerous foreign truck drivers on our roads?
Yeah. So when it comes to the accidents, we don't have an exact metric yet, but I can give you a metric when it comes to the number of drivers that we believe have these non-domiciled CDLs and are on our highways. And we first presented a number that was 876,000. We believe there's 876,000 additional CDLs that have been issued since 2021 in what we call a surge of issuance. We call it labor dumping, really a dumping, because we believe it's connected economically, a dumping in our industry. And we've identified these surges were at very specific points in very specific states. And we put that information together and we deliver that information to the FMCSA, and we've delivered that information to the American Trucking Association. They immediately pushed back. This is before this was really exposed and became a mainstream issue. They pushed back and said, oh, there's no way, this doesn't exist. This is a fringe issue. And then we started identifying all of the crashes that were connected to these drivers. And that's when you saw the president come out with his executive order. That's when you saw Duffy come out and say it's 100% true. There's a problem here. We've got to investigate this. And so they have confirmed 200,000 non-domiciled CDLs. But what I want to add to that is that they have only investigated closely 5 states. And that 200,000 non-domiciled number is just a rough number from their investigation of those 5 states. Our investigation encompassed the entire country in all states. And our investigation was not specific to non-domiciled CDLs. We were just saying, hey, there's been a surge in CDL issuance, and we can't tell you what type it is. Sure. But based on what we're seeing in the industry, and based on the fact that the American Trucking Association has tried to convince everybody there's a truck driver shortage, it must be non-domiciled CDLs.
So when you're talking about the 200,000 non-domiciled, so people who don't know what that is, they might say, all right, well, you have a bunch of Americans that they might drive trucks in a state that they don't live in, so they're going to have to get a non-domiciled CDL. Why is that a problem, and how does that, point to foreign nationals?
The non-domiciled CDL, this is a very important point. And because this shows the contortion of the law and the loophole that was used and the reason that we're here. Okay. The non-domiciled CDL, it's such a fringe name. It's unusual. It's uncommon. Like everybody's like, what the hell is that? In fact, when we first started talking about this, all of the leaders in the industry were like, what is a non-domiciled CDL? So the people shouldn't be surprised that they have to ask the question. And that's because very few industry players used it. Very few. In fact, I do not have a single constituent or associate or colleague, whatever you want to call it, whether that be an owner of a trucking company, whether that be a tenured safety director of a trucking company, that has told me prior to this coming public that they had ever hired a non-domiciled CDL. Okay.
So this is important because to people who don't know, there's reciprocity, non-domiciled, everything. You'll get, especially before constitutional carry, people will get like a firearms license. I had an Arizona one. I'm not from Arizona. It was non-domiciled. You're saying in the trucking industry that is not a thing. You're in Arkansas. You're going to get an Arkansas CDL, and that's it. You're not going to get one from Texas.
You're not going to see Arkansas non-domiciled CDLs anywhere. And so all of the trucking companies here, they've never hired any non-domiciled CDL drivers. So what is a non-domiciled CDL driver and who was using it? The non-domiciled CDL was something that was granted so that large trucking companies, billion-dollar corporations, okay, that are spread across the country and have training centers in multiple states, are able to take a driver who lives in Arkansas, hire him, train him in Kansas, and issue him a license while he's in Kansas, even though he lives in Arkansas. So he's not domiciled in Kansas, but they're going to issue him a CDL. That is the intent. That is the purpose. It was done to make it easier for large corporations to increase the flow of their pipeline of new drivers, to speed up that flow, and to reduce the cost of having to go back and get the license and then come back and start work. Logically, that's logically fine for us. Like we don't have a problem with that. What we have a problem with is in 2000, around the time, and we believe it was the door was cracked open, and that states like California and Illinois started abusing this probably 10 years ago in a very small trickle. Okay. And so they had already known how to do it. But in 2021, a specific trucking action plan was formed, and this was done by the Biden and Harris administration, along with special interest groups inside of our industry. They all got together and said, hey, let's expand this. And we know that because when you look at the language says that it targeted refugees. Okay. Wow. So it had a target for refugees. And when we give you that 876,000 number, we didn't just dream that number up. It's on the Biden-Harris Trucking Action Plan fact sheet. They brag about doubling the issuance in the number of CDLs during a driver shortage. So how's that possible, right? And then when we went and validated,
so you're saying the scope is we have about 1.5 million?
No. The total's 876,000. But what I'm saying is that we first saw that number. We were intrigued when we saw that number on the White House fact sheet. And so we went to go validate that number and got into the FMCSA data and proved that number out based on those 10 states that I shared with you. And so that number didn't just come from the data that we found. That number first came from their bragging in the White House fact sheet that they were able to double the issuance of the CDLs.
And you're saying you're fairly confident that the majority of these non-domiciled CDLs are going to be at a minimum non-U.S. citizens?
Absolutely. And that's because at the same time that this is taking place, the American Trucking Association is screaming. I mean, just Google truck driver shortage, American Trucking Association. It's all they've breathed for the last 10 years. And so how do you double the rate of issuance for CDLs when you're saying nobody wants to be a truck driver?
Wow. So they doubled the rate. And I just want to throw out this statistic here that shocked me because, again, this is a big problem with foreigners that even are here illegally because there's many ways to get legal status that, frankly, we shouldn't. Particularly, I think we're all in tune with the whole Minneapolis Somali situation. That was all legal. But according to Department of Transportation, 1/3 of Minnesota CDLs were issued to illegals.
So I've heard that same number. What I can tell you is that this entire process that they've contorted is they're not issuing these driver's licenses to people possessing work visas. They're issuing all of these people to people who are in possession of EAD cards.
EADs. Yeah.
And the EAD card does not give you lawful status in the United States.
It's all of the Biden illegals that they came in, they gave them an EAD and a court date.
Exactly. So, and we know this because in September, ICE launched its first operation. It was called Operation Guardian. It was in Oklahoma. That's where we passed SB 20, where we first got our first state legislation passed. Great state, fully on board with protecting their highways and their citizens. Governor Stitt is all about cleaning this up. And so is the DPS departments. And so Oklahoma has just been a very good partner in getting all this cleaned up. So anyway, so ICE goes and does Operation Guardian there. And that's when they arrested. So they decided to interdict all of these trucks passing through on Interstate 40, pull them all in. Let's go past looking at the CDL. So in years past, everybody has just assumed all these truck drivers are legal because we've got law enforcement. They're pulling these guys over. Surely they wouldn't be allowing a bunch of illegal aliens to be driving commercial vehicles all over our country, right? Nobody knew that commercial motor vehicle enforcement, law enforcement, cannot ask immigration questions.
Wow.
So none of these cops are able to ask, are you a lawful, do you have lawful status? Do you have lawful presence here in the United States? All they ask for is the CDL. And so if a state's willing to give an illegal alien a CDL, he presents a CDL and the cop lets him go. And so what ICE did different, under a 287G agreement with the state of Oklahoma, they deputized the state commercial motor vehicle enforcement officers to enforce immigration law. And they said, okay, let's pull all the trucks in, let's check them. And 20% of all of the trucks they checked were illegal aliens. They said they ran out of jail space and they ran out of tow trucks.
That is just that's astounding, because we're not even getting to, I want to get to the Indian angle here. There's a lot of Indian nationals that a lot of them, you got to believe, are here legally. And we're seeing a tremendous amount of reckless driving. Just almost every day, there's another story there. So that's before we get to the worker visas. You're just saying the EADs or whatever form of illegal was 20% random stop. I want to get to another angle of this before we get back to the enforcement. So I mentioned earlier, the Florida governor just said that they recovered 400 semi-trailers that were stolen. Who's behind that?
So, all of these drivers, like I said, they don't work for American-owned trucking companies. They're not going and working for the generational trucking companies that have been around here and have kind of built the industry. They're all new operations set up in several different hotspots. So they work for each other. And so, you mentioned California and the Punjabi population. They're mostly located out of the Fresno, California area. All of their operations are there. All of their terminals are there. They live there. Their families are there. They get in their trucks, but then they drive all over the United States. Well, the same applies for different demographics. And so in Minnesota, of course, it's the Somali population. So you have a huge population of Somali truck drivers who have set up a terminal operation out of there, but then they go all over the country. And in Chicago, you have Eastern Europeans, mostly Serbians. And then in Florida, we have Cubans and Haitians. And then in Texas, of course, you have Central America, mostly down in San Antonio and Laredo area. And so if these guys are willing to break immigration laws and sneak into the country and break wage and hour laws and to do all this other nefarious activity, they're breaking hours of service laws. Most of these fleets are known to work 20 hours a day. That's why we're seeing these major crashes where a truck hits a car at 70 miles per hour and the driver's asleep. It's because he's been working for 16 and 17 hours instead of the regulated shift of 11. And so he's physically exhausted.
In other words, what you're saying is, when you look at all of the malarkey that we saw in the manual labor, the farm, whatever, but that's kind of a static situation. The last decade, that's been plugged into the dynamic environment of truck driving. Yeah. So when you start cutting corners, it's all good. Just get the cheap labor in, and all of the cultural safety problems, and you apply that to truck driving. Well, that's a traveling bomb, and a lot of them have, carry hazmat material. And suddenly you have no rules, no culture of safety, no culture of excellence. And in front of our eyes, even while we're getting somewhat better on an immigration enforcement across the board, they're just out in the open. So, before we get to solutions, I just want to go through some cases I find on your feed here. So, non-domiciled CDL driver was caught hauling hidden hazmat load through your state, Arkansas, and the highway police officers didn't check his status. So even after they're deputized, you found a case where they're still not checking.
So Arkansas, so that's the interesting part of this, and Arkansas does not have a 287G agreement where the law enforcement officers have been deputized to enforce immigration law. So we're trying to draw attention to the fact that only a small handful of states actually have that 287G agreement. And so most all of our commercial motor vehicle enforcement, even with all this media attention, even with our industry being under the spotlight right now, we still do not have these law enforcement officers under these 287G agreements. Why is that? Why has Arkansas, this all started in Arkansas. It started as a battle over two competing House bills, House Bill 1569 and 1745. We continue to highlight their law enforcement officers not enforcing immigration law, not enforcing out of service, but they refuse to sign these agreements and to apply the law appropriately. So what is that? We believe it's political. We believe that these billion-dollar corporations have lobbied for all of this additional driver capacity to come in because it's very profitable. It's very profitable for them to be using these drivers. And so it's the unspoken word. As loud as we are saying there's a problem, where's the noise of the people that are trying to protect this classification of driver? You don't see them. They don't show themselves. They don't raise up anywhere, but they're there and they're working overtime.
Wait, so you're saying, I mean, this is not just in the context of the trucking issue. You're saying in general, Arkansas does not have 287G.
I'm saying this is specific. They have to have 287G for commercial motor vehicle enforcement.
Got it.
Because it's a special troop.
What have you found in Florida where they have the most robust street level enforcement among state and county law enforcement? What have they discovered with trucks on the road?
I haven't seen exactly the detail. I saw the report by the governor that he just released, but really the staunchest state right now for enforcing these rules has been Oklahoma, has been Indiana with the ICE operations that we saw. I think a lot of the stuff that Florida is doing is in the right direction, and I haven't been privy to all those details. I'm very excited about the legislation that they just introduced, where they're fining the company $50,000 when they find that an illegal alien is driving the commercial motor vehicle. So they're definitely all headed in the right direction. But they have that 287G agreement with ICE. And so I'm confident that they are probably enforcing that. And that's why you're seeing those results.
So that's a good bill. And I have to get the bill number. And of course, the Oklahoma SB 20 is the good example of that. The other thing that the Florida Attorney General announced last year is, if you're telling me that it's this pervasive that you can't miss it, that if you would do a random sampling somewhere, you'll have a massive percentage that are illegal, and then another big percentage of these various ethnic groups, depending on the geography. A lot of them are green cards, some of them are H visas or other worker visas. So what he announced was that, all right, we're going to station cops at truck stops because that's where they got to go, and start sampling them. Are you seeing more of that across the country? Isn't that a good idea?
We have reports that these guys are operating more at night now when the way stations are closed and when there's less law enforcement, and they're avoiding a lot of these truck stops. And so they're already taking, and we've actually heard that from the enforcement officers too, that when they set up a sting, an ICE sting, that they're quick to communicate with each other on Telegram and on WhatsApp and on Signal as a group to avoid the operations. And so they'll do the same things on the truck stops. And when we talk about the 200,000 number, and you talk specifically about the Punjabi population and the type of visa that they have, I want to be clear that the vast majority, probably 95% of that 200,000 are going to be EAD card holders, illegals, not H-1B, not
even
H-2B,
the Indian population,
not even the Indians.
So on that point, again, I just, the amount of cases I'm seeing, is there something culturally going on there, or is it just simply that when you're cutting corners and you're not going through the proper process, you're here illegally, you're just naturally not going to be a good truck driver?
Well, so there's a couple of things. Number one, the English proficiency causes challenges in training and qualification to make sure that these guys are ready to go out here and operate safely on the roads. But the second thing is the hours of service. The hours of service violations are so egregious. That's where the real hazard's coming from. That's where the danger's coming from. And a lot of people don't really understand that. But these guys are actively hacking their logbooks. So they're using multiple identifications. So let's say you're a single driver and you're allowed to work 11 hours a day. They're logging in as a team driver and driving 20 hours a day. Now, an American truck driver won't do that, okay? And he won't do that because if he has a crash and kills somebody, he's going to be charged with a felony, he's going to go to the pen, and then he's going to have huge civil liability that will haunt him for the rest of his life. And not just him, but also the motor carrier. Here's the problem. Because all of these guys are ghosts, there is no criminal liability. There is no civil liability. They get in here and there's no law specifically focused on the behavior of being an illegal alien truck driver and killing someone. And so usually they get off with a misdemeanor because they didn't have the proper license or what have you, which is the case that we saw with Mark Bryant in Arkansas when he was killed. The guy spent about 90 days in jail. He was an illegal alien from Honduras, kills Mark Bryant and just gets off with a slap of the wrist. And so there's no criminal liability. And then civil liability, who are you going to sue? Most of these guys are using false names when they go apply for the driver's license, when they go get the EAD cards. Good luck tracking them down. I know of several cases right now where there's one in specifically over in Kentucky where a tow truck driver was killed by a guy from Uzbekistan. As soon as he got out of jail on the misdemeanor, he's gone. They can't find him. And so there's no accountability on the criminal side. And then on the civil side, they all work for these small trucking companies. They don't work for American-owned trucking companies that have strong balance sheets and have to protect their balance sheets and have to protect the decades of legacy that they've already built for their business and their reputation. They work for a guy that has 2 or 3 trucks that lives in Fresno or that lives in Chicago or that lives in Minneapolis, and they're all working as a team. And so as soon as they get hit with that crash, they have the minimum amount of insurance, $750,000. They shut that entity down and they start a new one. And the FMCSA is not doing anything to prevent these chameleon type relationships. And so when a guy has an accident, instead of going to prison and instead of paying dollars and us getting a corrective action on him so it doesn't happen again, these guys just move and go get back in a truck and take off again.
We just had 3 people killed, including a 2-year-old, by an illegal truck driver in Roanoke, Virginia. Didn't speak English. Is listed as El Hadij Karmoko Katara. So, I mean, this is every day we're seeing this. I mean, isn't the solution simple? I mean, aside from obviously number one, that, either end the non-domicile CDL, or if you're going to have it, you have to show proof of citizenship in order to get that, particularly if it's a non-domicile, you got to be a full citizen. Everything else, you can't be here illegally, although I would say we shouldn't have it for foreign workers, just, for a number of reasons, just the labor reason alone. But shouldn't we have very stiff criminal penalties for anyone caught in the state driving illegally? I don't care what you did. We're not talking about after someone dies. I'm saying, shouldn't it be this simple that if I'm Texas or Florida or whatever, and okay, I can't control what, the malarkey in California, but I'm just going to say, look, you do yours, but if you're caught in our state driving and we call in and find you're here illegal, and we're going to check, and we're going to, we know where to find them, the truck stops, whatever, 5 years in prison.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we saw Tennessee revoke. Essentially what they've done is they said it's illegal for illegal aliens to drive in their state. That's revoking reciprocity is what it is. And so, if we revoke reciprocity and I said this when we first filed House Bill 1569 in Arkansas, no state ever intended, when we agreed to have reciprocity amongst the states with one another and have interstate travel, it was during a time of high trust, and there were not a bunch of illegal aliens running around the country driving commercial motor vehicles. And so nobody intended for these rogue states to be sending us these hazards. And so I think it's fairly simple for us to say, it's not us that's breaching the agreement. You breached the agreement when you issued all these CDLs to these illegal aliens. You breached this reciprocity, and because you breached that, we're going to revoke your reciprocity. And to your point, we limit it just to the illegal aliens. And when you violate this, yes, absolutely, 5 years in prison.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's the thing. Like states like Florida already banned, they revoked reciprocity even for regular driver's licenses for illegals. But what I'm saying is you got to add a major criminal penalty to just deter them from ever coming into that state. And that's really, and if enough red states do this, this is really going to limit them to their states and really limit their operations, because you can't, have such a large swath of the country where, you're going to be on the hook for prison time. That's definitely something we need to do. We also need to just obviously clarify that, we're going to punish the companies criminally as well. Again, I think the restrictions should apply on worker visas as well, not just to illegals. What about the USMCA? So where basically that forced us to accept Mexican and Canadian driver's licenses. I honestly, I don't care about foreign trade. Just to be honest with you, like, I'm just gonna say it bluntly. When it comes to our safety and sovereignty, like, yeah, I get we signed that, but if we have problems, like, I don't care. Is there any way to? Well, let me start off by saying, how much of that is a problem, or are most of the problems you're talking about not coming from it, meaning it's more homegrown, in the sense that they come here illegally and get it in the blue states, rather than they're getting it from Mexico, or the Indian drivers in Canada getting it from Canada?
They're both absolutely problems. The non-domicile CDL problem is much bigger right now.
Okay.
Than the problem coming up from Mexico and coming down from Canada, but they're probably more egregious because there's really no oversight. What's been shown here is there's really no oversight in place for all of these drivers. And so if we don't have any mechanisms of enforcement in place, if we don't have any mechanisms of oversight in place, then we shouldn't have the activity. And that's really the point. And so in the USMCA agreement, there's a clause, a clawback clause, that says if there has been harm inflicted on the American people, and specifically on the workforce, that we can revoke that reciprocity. We can pull that back. It's just a simple drop of the hammer. And so why are we not executing that? Why is that not being executed? You have the trucking industry that's in the middle of the longest recession that it's ever experienced. We're almost 4 years into it now. Okay. So what more do you need to show that material harm has been done to the American truck driver than to say we're in the longest recession we've ever had, and point to we have a supply crisis? It's not demand. Demand's down, but demand only went down within the last 6 quarters or so.
It's because of the economy.
Exactly. But the trucking was already in a recession before the demand dropped. And so that shows you that we are in a supply crisis. We have artificial supply that's been pumped into the system that caused the crash, and the recent drops in demand have just prolonged the crash. They've just intensified that.
And the thing is, with everyone talking about nationally at the labor market level, this being the most important issue, that what are we going to do with white collar jobs and this and that?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
You can't get a better job, a better paying job, that if you had to look towards the future where you might want to steer the young generation, the notion that, we just can't, Americans just don't want to do it, or, you can't play that same game they try to play with farm workers or things like that. I mean, this should be the exact sort of job we should be reserving for Americans. So I want to end off just with the Trump administration federally. Obviously, at a state level, we need these bills like SB 20. But again, it's only as good as the governor and the executive branch are willing to enforce it. It's all about enforcement, follow through. But at a federal level, so Trump had that order. Duffy has been saying a lot of good things, but there's 2 things I don't get. Why is it that the FMCSA has continued to sort of operate under the old regime? And why is it that, am I getting this right, that the Postal Service is actually using illegals and non-domiciled?
Absolutely. So
how does that happen?
Yeah, so let's start with Duffy. Duffy, so at the executive level, when it comes to this president and when it comes to our secretary, we have the right people, whether that's Secretary Noem, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Duffy. They're all following the lead of President Trump on this issue, and he's saying go fix it, and they're all in. But unfortunately, as you all know, when we get a new executive office, we don't get a new deep state. We don't get all these new career staffers, right? So you have these agencies that are still full of all the people that were there in the previous administration that made all these bad decisions and that were responsible for the oversight of this entire industry. And so what we've run into is Duffy sent a request to FMCSA and said, "Hey, we've got a problem here. Let's do something about it." And so they're like, "Okay, well let's draft an interim final ruling." Okay, who drafts that? The career staffers draft that.
But we need to have oversight. I mean, you have this Amber McReynolds who runs the Postal Service. I don't get how you could be here illegally and get a federal job.
Right. And so on the post office front, so when we switch to that conversation, they're not working directly as employees for the post office. What the post office has done over the last 5 or 6 years is that in their contractual relationships with their trucking companies, they've replaced all of the American-owned trucking companies who employ American truck drivers. They've replaced all of them with brokerage operations. And these brokerage operations are brokering all of the freight to these hot spots in Fresno and in Minneapolis, in Chicago. They're giving all of the post office freight to these carriers. And the post office is saying, well, we're not dealing with them directly, so it's willful blindness, right? But the problem with that is they had an inspector general report done in 2024 for the post office that said, y'all have a big problem here. You are not vetting these drivers. And because of that, this is causing a hazard on the roadways and it's damaging the workers. And nothing's been done about that, Daniel.
See, this is where follow through matters. And this is why you cannot have a sycophant media with the pom-poms and even on the right. Oh, this is great. We signed this. Look at that statement. That's great. But we don't need TikTokers. We need a movement. And part of a movement is what you're doing is that you follow through. Oh, my Twitter blew up because I made a big deal out of an issue. Well, no, that's not the goal. That's a means, that's a tool to actually solve the issue. And that's why I appreciate what you're doing. This is really in depth. I think we covered a lot, but again, folks, go to ATU Truckers and you'll see it's just endless. And these are the ones we find. Obviously, immigration status is not is not readily available. For years, I've covered at the non-commercial level just the Latin American machismo culture of the drunk driving, which has been disproportionate among that illegal population. But now we're seeing with trucks, both the drunk driving, but all sorts of carelessness. I mean, in Indiana, they caught Jasveer Singh and Gurpreet Singh arrested for having 300 pounds of cocaine in their trailer, and both now have ICE detainers on them. So this is unbelievable. We talk about, the Democrats used to say they're in the shadows. It's like, give me a break. How can you be a truck driver and in the shadows? No, they're not. They're doing it out in the open. We can end this overnight. Severe criminal penalties for anyone caught in the state driving. And certainly, obviously, at the issuance level, you certainly don't issue to at least with the non-domiciled, issue anyone who's not a citizen. Shannon, where could people find more about you, what you're doing? Is this just ATU Truckers on Twitter?
We have a website. It's americantruckers.com. And we've got a webpage on there where we actually track all the legislation that's taking place at the federal level. We hope to expand that to the state level as these sessions get fired off and we see a lot more bills getting filed on these topics. But also, go to our Twitter and our Facebook. We have a YouTube page. Every one of them, our handle is at ATU Truckers on all of those different social medias.
Awesome. And folks, as the sessions, progress, we're going to be highlighting specific bill numbers for you to take to your reps in your states on this and many other issues as well. We got to highlight that. So I'm looking forward to you guys staying abreast to that issue. I'm really going to rely upon you. Hey, Shannon, wow. I mean, may God be with you on this issue. I'm so happy you brought it to light. It's worse than I ever could have imagined. I really don't like hyperbole. I don't like demagoguery. I think people sometimes exaggerate things, and this is just unreal. I can't believe how right you are. It's even worse than you made it out to be. So this needs to be solved. At ATU Truckers, God bless you, Shannon. Thanks for joining us today. And folks, thank you all for joining again. I really look forward to the Substack. At Daniel Horowitz on Substack. I'm going to send out another email tomorrow. Follow my columns at The Blaze. And of course, if you're only listening, try out the video at Horowitz Show on YouTube. Let me know if you have trouble finding it with the algorithmic slop. But that is it for today. Till tomorrow. God bless you all. Micah 6'8".